training hard, being very involved in the sport of boxing, to come to you at least once a week, if not twice, with all the information you could ever use on the greatest sport on planet Earth, whether that be fighters of the past, fighters of the present, gambling picks, odds, recaps, funny shit. You want it, we got it here on Boxing. And last, but probably the most important, as we need more subscribers on the show, if you know a friend or a family member, or maybe even a crazy ex-girlfriend, anybody that you know who enjoys combat sports, especially boxing, refer them to this podcast, because I am sure they'd love it. Well, we've had a strong year here on Boxing. For one, we're coming off of our first episode of getting paid, and though it was low chump change, we are excited nonetheless for it. Work is starting to pay off, getting some good collabs in on bigger shows, getting a little bit of notoriety finally here, and we're very excited about it. I want to talk more with the boxing community. I'd like to get to a point where we're doing some lives where people get on that are in any sort of way interesting or have something enlightening to say. We have a couple categories to go over, being as it is the end of the year recap here, as other shows do. We are no different here. We're going to do fight of the year, fighter of the year, coach, trainer of the year, who had the best year in boxing, who had the worst year in boxing, and the last segment is fun, but the least important, as it holds no weight, fights that we wish to see next year in boxing. Could you imagine that? A loyal, hardcore fight fan like myself doing a segment like that? Usually when you watch boxing long enough, you are somewhat trained to know not to ask for things you wish for, but just to enjoy the things that we get out of boxing. So anyways, let's jump right in here. I am proud of this list. We name off some kind of contenders, and I'll give you the one pick that in my humble opinion I think should be the answer of them. But I will say that even as far as contenders of these kind of categories go, lots of these shows are missing them. So fight of the year, which is honestly, in my own opinion, probably the most important thing, because you can name fighter of the year and that comes and goes, and nobody remembers, oh, this guy was a fighter of the year. They just remember a fight, or they remember certain fights where they were very noticeable. And the fight of the year is good for the winner and the loser because it's the fight of the year. So by definition, it would be highly competitive and back and forth. And if it's the fight of the year, it's the fight that everyone remembers. And, you know, being a warrior kind of in boxing is very important to even the technicians of this sport, you know, to kind of be granted that, to have some appreciation for how well the fight was and how much, you know, it showed about the human spirit and whatnot. So we're going to go over that category first. And I've not heard a lot of these on here. I haven't heard anybody bring up the Taylor Serrano, which, you know, let's save that for the end, shall we? But Taylor Serrano, definitely up there for fight of the year. And then I have heard a lot of the Joseph Parker, Joe Joyce. We have that down, the 11th round KO there. We have the Sebastian Fundora versus Erickson Lubin fight with the KO in the 9th round. Now that was, of course, a great fight as, you know, Sebastian Fundora drops Lubin in the 2nd round. Lubin comes back, drops Fundora in the 7th round, battle it out more, and we get a stoppage in the 9th. That was fantastic. Again, the Joe Joyce Parker fight, you know, was good. It showed a lot and was very important for Joe Joyce. But as far as the categories of fight of the year go, I'm going to go ahead and toss that one to the side, although it deserves a contenders list because, you know, although Joseph Parker had some moments in there, it was a lot of Joe Joyce doing work towards the end and putting in the cumulative damage that ended it in the 11th. Taylor Serrano, let's leave that one up. Let's sadly toss the Joe Parker, Joe Joyce one out. Let's toss out the Erickson Lubin, Sebastian Fundora. I'm not confident that that should be the pick out of all of these. And let's introduce one that we don't hear all the time. Right from the very beginning of the year, Michael Conlan versus Leigh Wood with that 12th round KO from Leigh Wood in a fight where Conlan dropped him in the first, possibly 10-8 round there, and went on just stealing rounds for about 7 more rounds and just had the fight handedly. Kind of no matter how badly it would have gone in those last couple of rounds, as long as he survived and saw the bell of the 12th round, he would have handedly won that fight, no matter what. But he was not only dropped, but viciously KO'd and swung on long after he was out of it and fallen through the ropes, down, almost hitting his head on the concrete. Absolutely phenomenal fight. So for me, out of these 4 contenders, I'm going to narrow this right down to Leigh Wood, Michael Conlan, or Serrano, Taylor Serrano. So let's narrow it down. And between those 2 fights, which I had a very, very, very hard time picking, I'm going to go with Taylor Serrano because of, you know, the stakes in that fight being so high, and for unifying all of these different belts, the stakes being high as the first 2 women to headline a boxing event in Madison Square Garden. The stakes of them being possible, you know, them being within both of them, within the top 4 greatest, top 3 probably, greatest female fighters that there are alive today, and possibly ever. Those stakes are just phenomenal, and this fight was absolutely brilliant from the start all the way to the finish, and also extremely close. I do not suffer fools gladly. So if you wanted to say that you thought Amanda Serrano won that fight, that is okay with me. If you use the word robbery, right? This is something that I've been hearing, and man, it pisses me straight off. If you use the word robbery for the Amanda Serrano versus Katie Taylor fight that was incredibly close and could have gone either way, it was not even remotely in something that you would categorize within fights that were robberies. You need to go, you're probably a cuck, so you should probably go out and get a girlfriend. That's the first thing. Or if you're a girl, probably go out and get a boyfriend. And then also just get out of the corner of that room, stop watching other people having sex, you know, because that's not great for your well-being. And then go ahead and rewatch the fight, and don't be like a complete one-sided, bitter racist or something, you know. So that would be my words of suggestion to people that say that the absolute you know, just troglodytes that say that stuff is really great. So yeah, I'm going to go Taylor Serrano because the fight was so close, so competitive all the way through, all the stakes that were involved in that great fight, and the importance of it in women's boxing. Hard to pass up the Michael Conlan-Leigh Wood fight, though. Really hard for me to do that, but I had to pick one out of here. Let's move on to category 2, Fighter of the Year. Now, here's the kind of contenders that I have put in there. You know, last minute I threw in here, now he's not going to win, we'll give that away, but Hector Luis Garcia. Because of the Roger Gutierrez wins and the Chris Colbert underdog win, really, really good stuff from him. And he's starting this new year off now fighting Tank Davis, so I put him up there. But, spoiler alert, he's actually not the winner. Then we have Jesse Bam Rodriguez, who did make a huge splash this year in the boxing community. We have Dimitri Bivol, of course, with the Zurdo Ramirez and the Canelo wins. We have Devin Haney, who became undisputed champion in Australia, away from his home, and then went back and doubled up on it. And out of, 24 rounds that those 2 fights went, his opponent only probably won 2, maybe 3 rounds, so that's impressive. And we have Naoya Inoue, who, of course, became the undisputed bantamweight champion here right before the end of the year. That was one of the last fights to take place, and also, before that had doubled up on an impressive demolishing of his only kind of competitive rival in the sport in Nonito Donaire. So basically, this is what I want to do. I want to throw out Hector Luis Garcia because of the fact that that is really impressive. But compared to other names on this list, you can't have him being the winner. I want to throw out Devin Haney because his accomplishments this year were absolutely phenomenal, becoming undisputed champion in what is possibly the most stacked division in all of boxing is no feat to shy away from or smirk at, but he was expected to win. You know, and if we're all honest, out of all those guys like Lomachenko and, you know, Tank Davis and Ryan Garcia, and then you had Devin Haney, Teofimo Lopez, that he moved up to 4. A lot of these guys going up to 40, but that's a stacked weight class with a lot of names, in Shakur coming up to that division. And out of all of those guys, you know, there's a reason that we don't throw George Kambosos' name in there, even though he was so impressive in that Teofimo Lopez fight. There's a reason we don't throw his name in there. He doesn't belong in there with those kind of guys. And then when you have like a technician like Devin Haney, who's safe, very defensively responsible, that's a tough night out always for Kambosos. And we saw that in 2 back-to-back fights. I didn't think the second one was necessary. So I can't grant him Fighter of the Year, even though he had those incredible accomplishments, because everybody who knew anything about boxing knew that there was no chance. Like, that is you place your mortgage on the Devin Haney George Kambosos fights, both of them. You just place your whole mortgage on that. Yeah. So let's throw him out. And then, you know, Bam Rodriguez, okay? Bam Rodriguez, I at the beginning of the year thought he is the obvious case and he will be Fighter of the Year. And I'll be honest, I thought that because, you know, he beat Carlos Cuadras, right? And then the Sarista Kassoy Rungvisai win and stopping him, when those two guys have beaten up, you know, other people in the division. Sarista Cat winning 2 times against Chocolatito in his prime, you know. It was great. He had a little bit of a flat performance in his last fight, and just the things that were accomplished after that Sarista Cat win was just it. I unfortunately had to kick him out because this is a strong list, and it speaks to the strength of the list of names here that Bam Rodriguez has to go for me. And then we're down to Dimitri Bivol and Naoya Inoue. Now, either one would be fine at this point. Again, these lists are pretty strong. We had a good year here in boxing. Either of these are fine because I think that Naoya Inoue bumped himself up to a possible #1 on the pound-for-pound list. I do think that. You know, with unifying everything, and he was so close before. He was like #3 on most people's lists to begin with. I do think that, so incredible year for him, and obviously you can pick him. I am going to go with Dimitri Bivol because it's easy to say after the fact that, well, he's bigger and look at him, he's good, so he was always going to beat Canelo. But in reality, there were very few people, and I know some of them, and there were just very few people in this world that did pick Dimitri Bivol to win beforehand. Very few people actually did that and spoke about that where it can be documented. And I wasn't one of them, you know. I thought that I knew Dimitri Bivol's a monster and a beast, but I thought with a little bit of bias on the scorecards for one, just being completely honest here, and that also that in general, and in all fairness, Canelo would do a lot better than he did in that fight, to where it would make it close and you'd get a Canelo decision, which has happened a lot of other times in Canelo Alvarez fights. So that win and the way it was, where he barely, I think he gave up the 9th round to Canelo, was like it's possible that that's the only round that Canelo Alvarez won in that fight. He almost just basically washed what was the pound-for-pound king at the time, just kind of washed him in a 12-round fight, which is absolutely incredible. Then he doubles down to beat an undefeated, what was he, 44-0 or 45-0, 46-0, Zurdo Ramirez. And again, the way that he did it just completely washed him. There wasn't a round in that fight that Zurdo won. So I am going to go with Dmitry Bivol as fighter of the year. Let's do trainer of the year. This is a real quick segment. It's not Eddie Reynoso. So who is it? It's Derrick James. It's Derrick James because, you know, there's a lot of people hate, you know, Errol Spence. If you're a Terrence Crawford fan, you hate him, or vice versa. That shit is just going absolutely crazy and out of control. But yeah, Errol Spence, a pound-for-pound talent. He's up there on the pound-for-pound list for sure. And he had unified more belts now, where he's got 3 out of 4 of the belts in the welterweight division. And then he also has Jermell Charlo, you know, in his stable, who did become undisputed champion. So there is no other trainer or coach that can say that. So that's an easy pick for me. Let's go. Who had the worst year in boxing? So for me, this was easy. Who had the worst year in boxing? It was Jack Catterall. Jack Catterall had the worst year in boxing because he completely should have won that Josh Taylor fight and became undisputed champion, which we were also crazy about talking, and I've mentioned about, you know, Inoue and Charlo and these people already on this show. It's just the highest accomplishment to have, and you just say that, and there's not a lot of arguments that can go against it when somebody's undisputed and has every single belt. And at that time, you know, Josh Taylor had earned that through several different fights, ending in the Ramirez fight where he dogged him to death, and just looked phenomenal. And then Jack Catterall, on the other hand, is a mandatory, you know, title defense. Similar to how the George Kambosos Teofimo Lopez fight happened. Just a mandatory title defense that all the same people were mad about. They didn't know who Jack Catterall was. They paid him no respect, and they said, why do we need to see any of these fights against any mandatory contenders ever? Let's move on to fights we want to see. But wait a second, Jack Catterall comes out and absolutely wins that fight. He absolutely won that fight. Back to the absolute heathens and cucks that talk about it, never watched a boxing fight in their fucking life, and talk about Amanda Serrano, Katie Taylor. You know, this fight was what you want to look at, okay? This fight is what you throw out the word robbery for Jack Catterall. So he had the worst year in boxing and getting one of the most notoriously bad scorecards in the world, in a split decision loss to Josh Taylor. And I feel for the guy. Who had the best year in boxing? Now, again, obviously, as we just went over these last things, it's supposed to be a fighter, okay? It's supposed to be a fighter, and there are certain fighters I could have picked from. And if you want it to be a fighter, I might say that it was Naoya Inoue that had the best year in boxing. But I don't want to say that. I think it's very important to say that who got the most out of this year in boxing was women fighters. Women's boxing was absolutely incredible this year. And in a year where Spence Crawford fell apart, where we never get to see these fights we want to see, where all these lightweights didn't fight any of the other lightweights that we wanted them to see, and we always go on and on bitching about this stuff. In women's boxing, man, we got Clarissa Shields versus Savannah Marshall, the best fight that you can make for Clarissa Shields, and it was great, and Clarissa Shields won. And we got Taylor Serrano, which I named the fight of the year, and I believe in that. It was men or women. It was just fan-fucking-tastic. And we even got Alicia Baumgardner on the undercard of the versus Michaela Mayer on the undercard of the Shields fight. You know, we got a great year in women's boxing where you couldn't have picked a better female fight to have than those 3 fights. They took place all in this year. So it has to be the best year for women in women's boxing, basically. And then before we go here, let's just go over the little fun shithead one, which shouldn't matter to any boxing fans because we should know not to ask for things. This is why we can't have nice things, damn it. But fights to make in boxing in 2023. Let's go through the list. I do have quite a few. So let's start with this one because it's interchangeable a little. You could say Devin Haney versus Vasily Lomachenko, because that is a fight that is supposedly maybe going to be made for the undisputed all the belts, and that is technician versus technician, the old Jedi versus the young. That is a great chess match to watch for sure. So that can be up there, but you can also, to me, don't shoot me, but I've always said this for many years now, and so I will reiterate it yet again. For me, my own personal fantasy matchup for the last however many years has always been Vasily Lomachenko versus Tank Davis, Gervonta Tank Davis. I still want to see that fight. And also, if they don't make that undisputed fight, and if Tank beats Garcia, or he loses, or that fight ends up falling through, this is still a fight that can be made where Tank can look at this and say, maybe I can still win this fight. His management team would probably want him to get a win over Vasily Lomachenko. And being that Lomachenko is getting older and he's still winning, and he's still looking damn good towards the end of fights, but the rounds that he takes off keep getting further and further, more and more in the beginning. They might look at this and say that we can do this. I see that as a feasible fight to make. We have Dmitry Bivol versus Artur Beterbiev for undisputed all the belts at up there at the weight class, and then at the top, heavyweight Alexander Usyk versus Tyson Fury. I have Shakur Stevenson versus Devin Haney as a great fight to take place there as well. Naoya Inoue, who spoke about moving up in weight now that he is undisputed and collected all the belts to 122, could face Stephen Fulton Jr., Cool Boy Steph. That'd be an absolutely phenomenal fight. And lo and behold, of course, here it is. Let's see the duck emojis and all this bullshit. Spence versus Crawford. We can't forget about it, unfortunately. That is just such a fight I want to see, man. And then let's really think this thing through. I mean, with all of these fantastic fights, Usyk versus Fury is the only one that's up there. I'm going to throw out Inoue and Fulton. I'm going to throw out Bivol and Beterbiev. I'm going to throw out Haney and Stevenson. I'm going to throw out, Loma Davis, my dream fight. I'm going to say that these have to be between Alexander Usyk and Tyson Fury, or it has to be Errol Spence versus Terence Crawford. I know that if you had to pick winners in this, I've always said I wanted Spence. And depending on how things would go here, I might lean Crawford, maybe. Who knows? Who knows? That's a close, good fight. But I feel like that is still a closer fight where you wouldn't know what happened, really, than Usyk Fury. And I know we all want to see that. And I know that I love both those guys, but Alexander Usyk is a special talent as far as technical boxing goes. Head movement, trunk move, everything. He is a phenomenon. Angles, everything. He is truly fantastic. However, the absolute size difference for one with Tyson Fury, and you usually talk about, but he'd be slower this, but then Tyson Fury is also lightning fast and sticks to the jab out, and then also he knows how to use his weight, get in the clinch and lean on his opponent. He won't sit back and just try to box at range with a guy that's half the size of him, pretty much, like you would see Anthony Joshua doing with him. He wouldn't do that. So I'm really more confident, although I'd still love to see it, that Fury would beat Usyk because of the size discrepancy, and that they're both incredibly high-level boxers with good boxing IQ that are both fast, but then one guy's just a fucking mountain of a man compared to the other. I feel more confident that Fury would win than I do picking a winner in Spencer Crawford, so I still gotta go Spence versus Crawford as the fight to see in 2023. This has been a good year. Let's get on the subscribe button, man. Just go ahead and ship that out to some friends, and we got to get these numbers up for this next coming year. I want more interaction with the fans. I want more with boxing heads, more collaborations, which I've already accomplished some this year. with kind of the greatest names that I personally respect the most out of these podcasts on YouTube. And we're going to do more of it. We're going to build and we're going to grow. And until next year, loyal fight fans, stay loyal. Let's hope for a good year. Go check out that Ryan Garcia, Tank Davis Does It Happen analytic work that I did there on Boxing Gems. That was a high mark for us on this show this year. And I will see you next year. You might be getting an episode of Unknown to Casuals again to fill in some time. But yeah, this has been fun. Good year for us and a good year for boxing.